2025 marked the fifth year Jeff and I would be taking a trip to Wyoming to fish for trout. On our past trips, we focused our efforts on the northern portion of the Bighorn Mountains and a portion of the Shoshone National Forest. This year, we wanted to explore some new areas to fish, and the vehicle we were going to use to guide us was the Cutt-Slam. The Cutt-Slam is one of several angling challenges hosted by the state of Wyoming. Four subspecies of cutthroat trout evolved within the borders of Wyoming. The Cutt-Slam challenges anglers to catch each of the cutthroat subspecies in its native range. The program was designed to draw attention to the conservation and restoration efforts for cutthroat trout in Wyoming. On a mid-August morning, we left my home in the dark for the 810-mile drive to the Burgess Junction area in the northern portion of the Bighorn Mountains. After 13 hours in the car, we were really glad to see that the area that we had chosen to camp was unoccupied. We only had enough energy that first night to set up camp, have some dinner, and then go to bed. Well, we're in Wyoming now, but neither Jeff nor I were ready to jump into working on our Cutt-Slam just yet. The Bighorn Mountains lie within the range that the Yellowstone cutthroat trout evolved in. And both Jeff and I had caught and documented our Yellowstone cutthroat trout in previous years. What I wanted to see while we were here was how much damage that the elk fire, which had burned the previous fall, had caused in the area that we like to fish. This hillside, which was just above the area we set up our camp, burned in the fall of 2024 in the elk fire. I hiked 3/4 of a mile up a rough road to get to the trailhead. The road that I hiked in on was used as a fire break that prevented the fire from spreading further south and thereby into the area that we like to camp on. At the trailhead, I found a new sign warning of several hazards that were caused by last year's fire. This picture was taken just a little ways down from the trailhead. The Tongue River lay in the base of the valley below me. The fire did not cross to the south side of the Tongue River, but was rather confined to the north side. What was interesting to me is that the mosaic pattern that the fire had, with many areas of unburnt trees lying within the perimeter of the fire. I found these baneberries growing right beside the trail as I was hiking down to the river. The banks of the Tongue River are really variable, ranging from steep vertical cliffs all the way to these gently sloping grassy fields. I was lucky enough to be fishing in this grassy field when this cow moose showed up. She wasn't at all bothered by my presence and continued to munch on aspen and willow leaves like I wasn't even there. She did look at me occasionally, though, but it seemed to be more out of curiosity rather than fear or aggression. And then her calf showed up. I found a patch of blanket flowers growing in the rocks along the side of the stream. What made this one unique was that there was a crab spider sitting near its center. It took me a while to find it, but if you look closely, you can actually see a second crab spider sitting on the flower. Here's a little more detail on the larger of the two crab spiders. From the time that I left until I got back to camp, I caught 5 fish and had hiked 7 miles. I had caught brown trout, rainbow trout, and a brook trout. This 15-inch rainbow trout was the largest fish that I caught on my hike. After our one day of rest and fishing, we packed up our tents and drove almost another 200 miles further west to Yellowstone Park, where we had a 2-night reservation for camping at a backcountry campsite. We saw a lot of buffalo once we got into Yellowstone. This big fellow liked to roll in the mud. After picking up our permits at the Bridge Bay Backcountry office, we drove to the Cascade Lake trailhead, loaded up our backpacks, and hiked the 2.5 miles into our campsite near Cascade Lake. One of the requirements of camping in grizzly country is that food or any other items that could potentially attract a bear through their scent be stored safely off of a food storage pole. The one in our camp was impressively high. We got down to fishing right after we set up camp. We still weren't jumping into the Cutt-Slam yet, though. What attracted us to fishing on Cascade and nearby Grebe Lake was the presence of Arctic grayling and also West Slope cutthroat trout. West Slope cutthroat trout are not part of the Cutt-Slam. On the next day of our Yellowstone backcountry camping experience, we hiked a little over 2 miles into Grebe Lake. The reason we hiked into Grebe was because it was supposed to hold some larger cutthroats and also some larger graylings than what we had caught in Cascade Lake. When we got to Grebe Lake, what we found is that the wind was almost dead and the lake was just completely glass smooth. However, that didn't last too long. Just as we started to fish, the wind came up, and it actually came up to the point where casting was difficult. We didn't end up catching any fish at Grebe Lake, even though we both had a few hits. What really made our Grebe Lake adventure unique was that it was occupied by some very friendly swans that really didn't seem to care that we were there. On our second morning in our backcountry site, after breakfast, we packed up and hiked back out to the car. We then drove about 150 miles south to Granite Creek, which lie in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. Granite Creek was going to be the kickoff of our Cutt-Slam adventure because it held the fine spotted Snake River strain of cutthroat trout. The drive to Granite Creek took us through Grand Teton National Park. Even though I've been through the park several times now, I'm still impressed by the Teton Range. So this is Granite Creek and the mountain across from our campsite. What I really like about this mountain is how it changes as the light changes throughout the day. Granite Falls was about a mile or so upstream of where we were camping. Jeff and I were fishing close together on this day, and I was able to watch him catch a fish. I was hoping to get a picture of him holding up his trout, but unfortunately he released it just before I was able to get the picture. After I watched Jeff catch his fish, we split up. Jeff continued to fish upstream while I went downstream. Just a little ways below where I watched Jeff catch his fish, I caught this Rocky Mountain whitefish. I caught it on a waltz worm, which is a really nondescript fly. In the same run that I had caught the whitefish, I caught this 14-inch Snake River cutthroat. And just like that, Jeff and I had completed one half of the Cutt-Slam. Just above Granite Falls, a number of hot springs enter Granite Creek. In the 1930s, the CCC built this pool in order to capture the water from one of the hot springs. After about a week on the road without a shower, spending a little over an hour in the hot spring was a delight. Now that we were clean and had two of the four subspecies of cutthroats in hand, we headed to the Bear River drainage where we would target the Bonneville subspecies. 4 hours seemed like a long time to travel only 164 miles, but we found the rough roads of the first 9 miles and the last 15 miles accounted for about 90 minutes of that time. We camped at the Hobble Creek campground in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. With the old dude discount available through my America the Beautiful pass, camping camping was a bargain at only $5 per night. We were the only campers while we were here, and our campsite was really nice, with Hobble Creek bubbling away just down the hill from our tents. We hit the river to fish right after our camp was set up. I noticed caddisflies were laying eggs in the stream, and so I tied on a caddis pattern. I had a few hits while skittering the fly, but nothing took. My fly was in the water above a riffle while I looked through my fly box for a different fly when I felt weight on my line. I caught this 7.5-inch Bonneville cutthroat pretty much by accident. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And speaking of luck, just as I was about to take a second picture of the one and only Bonneville I was to catch, he flipped right out of my net, and I was left with a picture of my hand. We had now caught 3 out of the 4 cutthroat subspecies required to complete the Cutt-Slam, but were hoping to catch a larger Bonneville, which we had heard were available in Lake Alice. We weighed a hike into Lake Alice against leaving early to pursue the Colorado cutthroats, which were reported to be the most challenging to catch. We compromised and decided to hike the 2.25-mile trail to the lake and fish until early afternoon. Just before we arrived at the lake, we encountered a sign. The sign described that a landslide from a nearby mountain had blocked Spring Lake Creek and Lake Alice was formed. We also learned how the lake was named and that the lake held the only lake resident population of Bonneville cutthroat trout in the state of Wyoming. On the landslide dam above the lake, we found a small picnic area and this strange structure. The structure held a canoe along with some blue plastic barrels. I'm assuming that the barrels held some fish sampling gear. Additionally, I assume that the canoe was left up along the shores of Lake Alice because no one wanted to portage that canoe up into that lake more than once. Lake Alice was beautiful and well worth the hike in. There were trout cruising the shallows and they were rising to something. However, neither Jeff nor I managed to catch any of those. A frustration was that on our backcast, our flies would occasionally hit the rocks behind us and break off. Sometimes the smaller views can be just as pretty and inspiring as the larger landscapes. After a quick lunch, we were off to LaBarge Creek. We could have taken a shortcut and saved almost 50 miles, but Google Maps reported that there would have been no time savings, likely because of a very rough road. We were only going to be moving our camp 11 miles, but we had to travel 106 miles to get there. LaBarge Creek was home to the Colorado River subspecies of cutthroat trout. On our way out, I stopped on the road and took one last look at Hobble Creek, which flowed through the valley below us. I really like this area, and I think that I would like to come back sometime. There weren't any established national forest campgrounds along LaBarge Creek, and we ended up looking over several dispersed camping sites before we settled on this one. It was close to a really fishy looking portion of the creek, and it was wide open with plenty of room for our tents. The established dispersed campsites in this area look like they're primarily used by big game hunters, likely looking for elk and mule deer, and our site was no exception. Mornings could be chilly. However, the days quickly warmed up as the sun rose up over the mountains. Jeff is a coffee connoisseur, and he takes great pride in having a crema on the top of his cup. It didn't take long for Jeff and myself to both catch our Colorado River cutthroat trout. From here on in, all the fish that we are going to catch were going to be gravy. When I released this fish, he hung around in the shallow water by my feet for a little while. I think he kind of liked me. Fishing was really good, and we both caught a number of additional fish. I couldn't help but take a picture of this trout as well. The pinkish orange par marks and belly are really distinctive on it, and they are one of the distinguishing characteristics of Colorado River cutthroats. One afternoon, I got back to camp a little bit before Jeff, so I decided to climb the hill behind our camp. We were camped along the edge of the Fontanelle fire, which burned 65,000 acres back in 2012. I finished this box just before we left on our trip. I designed it to hold and organize my cooking gear a little bit better than what it had been on other trips. Here, I'm preparing an evening meal of ramen with little smokies. We had completed our Cutt-Slam, and now the pressure was off. We decided to explore the area a little bit, and we took a day trip to the South Fork of Piney Creek. To get to the South Fork of Piney Creek, we traveled through Snyder Basin, which was a broad valley. We both really liked the views that the basin presented to us. This is the road that we were traveling on. Notice in the background on the mountains, you can see the burnt trees that were left over from the Fontanelle fire. A little bit further down the road, you can still see the evidence of the Fontanelle fire where it crept up the mountain in the background. This was our first good look at the South Fork of Piney Creek. The creek itself looked extremely fishy. However, looks were very deceiving. We found out later that the fish population still hadn't recovered since the Fontanelle fire. I was told that the creek actually ran black for 5 years after the fire went through the area. The road we had been traveling on was actually part of the Lander cutoff of the old Oregon Trail. Traveling on the Oregon Trail and through this area was an extremely difficult and dangerous undertaking in the mid-1800s. This is the area we chose to fish on the South Fork of Piney Creek. Neither one of us caught any fish here. We completed the Cutt-Slam and it was time to go home. The drive from our campsite along LaBarge Creek in southwest Wyoming to central Minnesota was going to be a long one, and we knew we wouldn't be able to do it all in one day. We left early, waking at 5, packing up, and then we were on the road by 5:30. Our plan evolved to reaching Bismarck, North Dakota, and spending the night in a hotel where we could shower and enjoy a breakfast before continuing for the 5-hour drive to central Minnesota. Much of Wyoming is very dry. Traveling from southwest to northeastern Wyoming, we crossed vast areas of sagebrush flats that were interrupted by green crops when we crossed close to rivers. This Red Canyon Wildlife Habitat Management Area serves as wintering habitat for elk, mule deer, pronghorn, and moose. We completed our Cutt-Slam successfully, and I submitted my entry to Wyoming Game and Fish a day or two after we got home. Truthfully, this trip had a pretty grueling schedule, but I'm glad we did it, as we explored new areas, and that was one of our main goals. For what it's worth, I found that the Colorados to be the prettiest of the subspecies.